Welcome to Refined Resilience. I'm your host, Carrie Hill, and on this podcast, we highlight the small moments that shape our journey toward greatness and remind us that resilience isn't linear. Each episode features stories of perseverance and the little victories that often go unnoticed, illustrating that resilience is about finding strength in everyday life. Everyone, I am so excited to bring to you my guest, Celeste Edmunds from the Christmas Box House. Celeste is a powerhouse of a woman, and I cannot wait for her to describe from her mouth to you about the work that she's doing. The Christmas Box House serves children that are going through abuse, they're going through neglect, they've been through some very serious things, and Celeste can speak to that because she went through it herself. Her biological parents were addicts, and her childhood was an ongoing cycle of police calls, fighting, physical, sexual, and mental abuse. And at age 7, Celeste was taken from her home and placed into a child welfare system where moving every few months to a new environment became normal. By age 16, she had lived in more than 30 cities. Celeste views her childhood as a difficult but essential growing experience, and there were terrible things that happened to her life, but there were also caring people along the way who did what they could do to protect and nurture her. And she is the author of Garbage Bag Girl, which I'm just going to showcase this to you because I don't want to forget, but we're going to talk about this book with her today. And she did this in conjunction with Richard Paul Evans because she was his assistant, and she's been at the Christmas Box House for 29 years. And so she's been working with Richard Paul Evans, who is a very popular name nationally, but also here in Utah. And now she is the executive director at this location, taking care of, I think, 170,000 children have been served at the Christmas Box House over these 29 years. That's so powerful. She's passionate about making a difference in the lives of youth and the child welfare system so that others may not have to go through the same experiences that she had. Hi, Celeste.
Hello. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for letting me introduce you. I didn't want to miss some of those highlights, extremely important.
It's so interesting to hear somebody read my bio or talk about me and think, oh, that's right. I was that girl. Because you don't stay in those places every day thinking about it.
Well, and it's hard to sometimes because when you move on past it, you're not that person, so to go back and have to sit in that space where those things did happen and you did have that experience in your life can be emotional.
It's just a reminder of 30 cities. By the time I was 60, I just start to process it again.
Yeah.
Like, that's right.
Yes. Well, and how many, 170,000 kids, Celeste, over 29 years. So I want people to know who you are. We've referenced a little bit about your history, but just bring me in where you bring in readers at Garbage Bag Girl.
Yeah. So, gosh, I think the most important thing is to note that I was one of the kids that comes into our shelters. So when Richard and I talked about why would we write the book, especially as sometimes I'll have people say, well, why now? I wrote it a year ago, or I published it a year ago when I turned 50. And it's like, well, why now? Well, why not now is really a good question. But it is important. I had mentioned off camera, I wanted my children to be raised. I wanted to have the bandwidth to do it. But we also have children that stay with us who are in state custody, so they're confidential. And the wonderful community that gives to them will rarely get an opportunity to meet them. And they rarely get an opportunity to meet the people that are so generous to them. So this, for us, allows us an opportunity to bridge a gap in helping people to understand who they give to. And more importantly, who are the 500,000 children in foster care in our nation? 500,000 children in foster care. What do their lives really look like? Because I think we do what we're supposed to do. We pay our tax dollars. We're giving to these programs. And I think there's a misconception sometimes that I'm giving where I'm supposed to give. Oh, good. Kids have been taken out of those awful homes. They must be in a better spot. And oftentimes they are. But more than not, they're not.
Yeah.
They're either not in the right home, or they're not in the right mindset in a home that they're in, which is creating dysfunction and multiple placements. Behavioral issues are very extreme with some of these children. And so for me, it's an opportunity to help people understand who they are. What do they go through? Oftentimes, how are ways that we can genuinely help. So that's the why I got into it, because I was one of them. And I lost my brother and sister because there was not a Christmas box house. And so people will ask, what's your favorite thing you do, or what's your favorite statistic? And by far, it's the fact that we keep about 1,000 siblings together every year between the 3 locations.
Wow.
That's 1,000 brothers and sisters that would be ripped apart without the opportunity to have these houses, which is what happened to me.
Yeah.
And when you have lost parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, all the extended family, your things that you had, home, whatever that looked like for you, maybe your school, all the things, because you're basically moved in starting somewhere else. And then if you're placed again, you're moved in starting somewhere else. For me, that happened every 6 months.
Yeah.
2 schools a year, 2 families a year, and many have more than that. And so I just think there's a really important message that has to be had, which is those aren't just 500,000 kids. Those are 500,000 lives. They're more than numbers who may never get an opportunity to share their story.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a message that has to continually be talked about. They're always going to be there. This is unfortunately not one of those roles in life, those jobs that all of a sudden I won't have to have it.
Right.
We won't have any more child welfare workers. We will no longer need foster homes.
Yeah.
We won't need great programs like we've talked about, like the Children's Justice Center. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so we have to keep talking about who they are, what we can do better as a system, how we can rally around them as a community, as individuals, because not everybody wants to be a foster parent.
Sure.
Or not everybody, you know what I mean? But there's still so many things that I think we can do to help.
Yeah.
And, volunteering at nonprofits, there's just lots of things that I think people can get involved in. But most importantly, let's not just think of them as a number in a system. Let's remember they're little humans that have great possibilities of doing really cool things in their life, like being a CEO or an executive director.
I was just going to say, or eventually
or a great
helping other
parent,
kids,
if that's what they want.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever success looks like to them is great, but they get to have that too. And so for them, that's what I would say. You also are very worthy of having that successful life. As a matter of fact, I would go as far as saying you have an edge to get to have that. Your grit, your resiliency, your drive to push harder can put you in opportunities of having those moments and having those successes.
Yeah.
So,
Celeste, I really thank you so much for the information on that, because, we were talking off camera earlier about the fact that even though we know what the Christmas box house is, we hear about it and we know that it's doing good work. I think the mission of it is not as well known as it could be, even just here locally in our own state. And so giving some context for what the Christmas box house is, the demographic of individuals that it serves, and then you having a personal why for being involved with it is really beautiful. So I really appreciate that. And of course, we can't talk, we were saying earlier, there's 40,000 reported child abuse cases through the Children's Justice Center just in the state of Utah on an annual basis. And that is 2,000 more kids than the entire population of Cedar City, Utah, which is insane to think about that. So we can't talk about resiliency without also talking about the struggle of this demographic of kids, and how the Christmas box house provides a resilient foundation for them. And so, you mentioned, and in your bio, we share a little bit about your experience, 30 cities, 6, 7 years old, like you were in and out of this system. Walk me through what this experience was like for you, Celeste, as a kid. You came from really abusive circumstances in all capacities, right? Yep. For those that are listening, and you mentioned earlier, people don't understand truly what this process looks like. And so let's let our listeners and our audience members know What does it look like to be a kid in this system?
Yeah, I do appreciate the question, because I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think there's some assumptions that we just have to get them out of risk, which is critically important, we know.
Yeah.
But then what? Then where do they go?
Right.
Because like my great trauma therapist would say, even chaos is managed based on what you know. That's a control for you. When I first started in trauma therapy, when I decided to write my book, which I highly recommend.
Plug. I love it.
Right. Highly recommend. She's on speed dial. That it's important to realize that you are, like when I first started to write my book, and I thought, oh, why is this harder than living in it? I was very blown away that it was harder for me to write my story than live my story. And she explained to me that it's because when you're in trauma, especially children, but any age, most people are just trying to move through it as quickly as possible. You want to get to the other side. Very few people actually want to sit in it for a long time. So therefore, your process, your grieving process, all the things that you need to function, to move through it, are avoided.
Right.
So when you write, you're literally putting yourself back in it to not only relive it, but feel it and go through it. For me, I was the oldest of 2 siblings. And so taking care of them was the priority, and why I put myself often in harm's way. And an older sibling, when you ask what's it like, an older sibling will do that very often. They've taken this very parental role because they feel the parents have stepped aside or aren't doing a good job or whatever the reason. In my case, not even there, or sleeping on the couch. We now know that was a hangover. But at the time, mom was sleeping on the couch. I didn't know any different. So even though in my brain I knew this is weird and maybe not right, and I don't know how other kids live, it was still my normal. So the moment we are saving or removing a child from an awful situation, it's really important to remember we're still taking something from them. We're still taking a life that they know, which means anybody that championed for them up until then is no longer in their life. So I always ask people, when you take a child or you help a child, are you finding someone to champion for them that they feel they can rely on to help get them through the next part?
Yeah.
So at Christmas Box House, we have transitional therapists. It's a great example of someone that can step in and just simply say, which I wish I would have had, here's where we're at today. Here's what tomorrow should look like. Here's where what your next placement will look like. I think setting expectations for children that are in trauma like that, helping them understand the process. We talk about things like courts and Children's Justice Center and advocacy, and we use these terms, caseworkers. I'm a kid. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I have no clue what you're talking about when you're throwing around all the lingo.
Right.
I'm just thinking, okay, in my world, I'm 7, 8, 9, 10. I have new location, new people, all used items that have been borrowed to me, rarely anything new. For me, my stuff was always in a black garbage sack because it's just easier for a caseworker to open a trunk, pull a black garbage sack out of a bag or a box. You can't blame them, right? I mean, they can't have a trunk full of duffel bags all the time. So we're in this really weird, chaotic situation of transition every day. So even the old weird normal was still normal.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to go through new normal. But what happens when you maybe start settling in, and then new normal has to happen again, and new normal has to happen again. So you don't have context like we do as adults to say, okay, I can kind of look ahead and know that this is temporary.
Yeah.
It's not temporary for them. It's the realest thing that's going to happen in their life. And everything is changing. Everything is unexpected. Everything is unknown. So all the things that make us uncomfortable and fidgety is just going to happen to them every day.
How did that make you feel, Celeste? Because I mean, 30 cities, and
it's an unsafe feeling of not knowing where to turn and where to navigate. So for me, the only saving grace was, could I protect my own brother and sister? It gave me a role and a purpose. And I think today, when I look at resiliency skills, and purpose is a big one of those, and optimism, for me, that drove that. My ability to be able to try to parent when I thought I was mom already at age 7, and my sister was 5, and I was certain for sure I was mom because I was cooking. I was doing the cleaning. I helped her with her homework. I bathed her. I walked her to kindergarten. I'm the one that picked her up from kindergarten. I'm the one that made sure she ate. It wasn't my parents.
Yeah.
So that role did give me purpose. And I think in the long run, when I look back now and when I wrote my book, that served me well in that capacity. Where it ended up not serving me later is having to unlearn how to parent them and be a sibling when we reconnected.
Yeah.
Be a sister. What does that even mean when all I did was parent you? I mean, I remember telling my sister, finally, when I had my own son in the hospital, oh my gosh, this is what it really is like to be a mom. And I'm going to work really hard just to be your sister. But I didn't know how at the time.
Yeah.
And so I think it served me well to move forward when I was a kiddo. And then I think it didn't serve me well when I was an adult, and I didn't know how to fit into just being an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really where like the healing and the process comes into play later, when you realize you're no longer that child that has to caretake those people. You have to start caretaking you.
For you. Yeah.
And that's a hard transition.
Yeah. Well, and I really, if I think about you being in that position, right? And you're holding your sister's hand on the cover of this, which I love. But if I think about little girl Celeste and going back to that moment, like the purpose, we look at these cases, if you will, right? And we call them, we're right. If we're talking about the CJC or any kind of legal, so it's a case, right? We're looking at cases, we're looking at people's lives, and we're feeling all of the drama and all of the terrible, awful heaviness of what this abuse actually means for these kids. But I appreciate your point of view that the outside lens sees this as being the most awful, horrific thing that could happen. But when you're in it, it's just what's happening. It's normal. The abuse is normal. It's what you grow up with. And so, to learn those resiliency skills very early, you learn. I mean, 5, 6, 7 years old, you're doing, you're the parent for this, for your sister. And so I think we underestimate the resiliency of these, of children in these circumstances, because like you, they're already navigating and finding pathways to be resilient without realizing that's what they're doing.
That's right.
Right. So when you have kids that come to the Christmas box house, like, what is that process? So I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, Celeste, is when you finally realized that you had to process some things, that you couldn't parent and that you had to be sister now, right? And mom to somebody else. What did the resiliency process look like for you in just acknowledging that this was not normal, and how did you reframe life from that moment?
Well, I love the word journey because it's such a process that I don't think we obtain a goal in these areas where I'm done. Yeah. In anybody's life.
Right.
I think if everything is viewed, even when we talk to small children, when I talk to my 5-year-old grandson, sweetie, this is a great journey that you're on, and look how much we get to learn from it. Yeah. Is a better conversation for me to have with him than get here and we're done. Because I think that we're done and that the values that are placed around being done create a stopping point. Yeah. So I think I use the word journey a lot.
And then you're disappointed when it doesn't happen.
That's right.
The way that you think it's going to.
That's right. And so what if that, I think about adults that I always tell my children, make sure you, I'll walk in the door and ask my kids, what are we celebrating today? And my son will make the joke, Mom, what are we celebrating today? Because there really is something every day. Yeah. Really, that message for me is to say, celebrating the little successes along the way add up to the big success. Because when we set the goal, which is important, to be so high, if all the successes along the way weren't celebrated, I believe by the time we get to the big one, we don't celebrate it. Yeah. Because then we don't even recognize it. That's right. We don't even recognize it. We need the next big one, the next big one. So to me, every day has a miracle or something that is worth celebrating that reminds you to lift and have that higher feeling of higher spirit, higher frequency, whatever that looks like for you. I think that has to be a constant reminder on this journey. And for us, when kids come to the Christmas Box House, our motto is every child deserves childhood. I extend that with my book, that no child deserves to feel like garbage, or any human being at all. So what do we do for them to capture that? And to me, that is helping them realize what childhood really looks like. So for instance, if we have an older child with younger siblings, it's really common when we pull them aside and say, this is the activity we're going to do. This is where we're going to go. Maybe we're going to Cold Stone for ice cream, or we're going to go outside and you're going to, I don't know, go down the slide, or we're going to an amusement park, whatever it is. We want you to let us watch your brother and sister so you can participate and play. And there's always the, which I can relate to, there's always the side eye, like, who's really taking care of them, because you're used to being in that role. But there also is kind of a sigh of relief that's like okay, are you sure? I'll have kids that'll ask me when they're at Cold Stone ice cream. That's just a great example, because I have this really cool story of a 10-year-old boy who was getting his ice cream. He'd never been there before or anything like it. And he kept asking me if he could keep having toppings. And I was like, buddy, you can have as many toppings as you want. You can overflow that. It can weigh, you pay by the pound. You can have 27 pounds on it. I don't really care, because we have people that pay into the nonprofit for these
that experience.
That's right. And we want them to have that feeling of, I get to as well. It's one reason why we only take new donations. Like I'll say, I don't have a thing against hand-me-downs. My children wore hand-me-down jeans all the time from their cousins. Great. These kids, like me, only grew up with that. So that sense of dignity, being the garbage bag girl over and over again, of feeling like I'm only worth the stuff I'm putting in this sack. That trajectory has to be changed with these kids.
Well, and not only that, but you're putting it in a garbage bag.
That's right.
Right there, right? The connection between those two things already sets you up to feel less than everybody else around you. So
that's right.
I really love that. So for you, Celeste, what did you tap into? You mentioned celebrating the things every day. Is that something that you did since you were like young to help process?
Well, when I was little, I didn't recognize it, because I didn't realize that with my sister, for instance, I was always helping her to see the positivity. And I didn't know until later it was helping me to have that heightened level of optimism. So if my parents are fighting in the other room and I'm singing Silent Night to her to keep her calm, which was her favorite song, or I'm reading her a book, or I'm doing homework, or I'm thinking through, okay, we should both bath together because I have to get us through this, because I have to help her with her homework. So I have time to do my homework. Like some of those skills I learned were because I was taking care of her. So I'm losing, my childhood. One could say that, but at the same time, all of the optimism and the games I learned to play with her and the lifting her spirit taught me to do that indirectly. So I didn't know I was practicing it as a child, but later the fall hit when I didn't have that purpose, and I had to learn to build me up. So if I'm not, which is one reason I wanted to have children very quickly of my own. I wanted, and it's very common.
To fill the gap.
Yes. In young moms that are raised in traumatic situations, to want to have children, to have somebody else to love.
Thank you for sharing that. I never put that connection together, but now
you need something else to love.
I really appreciate that insight. And I think that speaks to the perpetual cycle of trauma to your kids, right? Because if you're just filling the gap, then we're not processing, then we've got to do it at some point. And now you've got kids that you have to do it with.
That's right.
So it's a much longer mothering cycle in terms of being happy or fulfilled, with yourself in motherhood. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
When my daughter, my oldest daughter, when I divorced their father, fortunately, they had him. He was more stable on his side. I kept moving us every year to year and a half, physically moving us.
Just because you were used to it. It felt normal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my older daughter comes to me one day super sweet. She's like, Mom, so do you think we could stay here longer? She was super nervous, very sweet and respectful, still to this day. And I just had this really horrific, like the fast forward movement when the camera comes to your face, like, oh, wow. I'm doing what's comfortable for me, very much thinking I have their best interest at heart, for sure. And it's not in their best interest that I transitioned them that much. That every 6 months, I had this thing about, okay, it's time to clean out your rooms, and anything we don't use, we throw away. It isn't that itself is a bad habit. It was that my intention was, we don't keep stuff. And they're calling my mom, or when they're going to her house rather than seeing her, they're asking her, can we bring things here, Grandma? Yeah. And will you keep them for us? Because Mom's going to make us give them away.
So that feeling of not being safe, you've passed on to your kids.
In a different way, but it was still there.
Right.
And so recognizing as parents, the things that we're trickling to our children takes an incredible amount of self-awareness. And I think we really have to listen to the hints that they're throwing out, like the asking, or my mom calling and saying, don't get upset, but Alex, my daughter, asked me if she could keep a few stuffed animals here, rather than me getting upset about, I can't believe you'd ask Grandma. Really thinking about that is, okay, things matter to her. Just because I don't attach to things, like stuff, physical stuff, I don't attach to it all.
Right.
My children will, because there was a sense of normalcy they had that I didn't have, that they got to do that. So as adults, as moms, as friends, as all the things, I think we have to sometimes pay attention to the signals that are coming, that I'm sending an unintentional, unhealthy message to somebody else because I'm projecting what happened to me. Yeah. And that's just a part of the resiliency and the growing and the learning.
That's so fascinating though, Celeste, because I'm just sitting in that space of like making that realization and that connection for women who have been, and probably men too. I would assume that there's men who have parented and protected their siblings and they feel the same, need to move, disassociation from things, but just putting myself in that situation as a parent and seeing how it's just muscle memory. It's not even intentional.
That's right.
So, so being resilient, I'm loving all the connections that I'm realizing here. So thank you for being here and helping people understand what this journey really is, and why there's so many people that are walking around the world, but really right here, even in our local community, that it's very easy to judge parenting. It's easy to judge situations. It's easy to say, oh, they're just, that woman's crazy, or that guy is not, without having the context of the environment, the journey.
Are they really, I always ask someone to ask the question, are they really a bad parent?
Right.
Or, because I really get the most crazy calls, people knowing where I work. They're like, you would not believe what I saw today. And I have to be careful.
Right.
So I will ask, do you really feel in your heart they're a bad parent, or do you feel they're parenting different than you would? And that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Because if they're in danger, they're in danger.
Right.
And I'm not going to fully determine. That's what CPS does, with our state. But I just want them to ask the question. They're like, oh, they had, and their shoes weren't tied and they were filthy. And I'm like, my son was filthy all the time.
Right.
So I think it's just fair to always ask the question.
What the definition is. Like, let's
get some context. Super judgy, like, that kid always looks like whatever.
Right.
Just quickly ask yourself, is it that you really feel they're in harm's way, which is a no-brainer call.
Right.
Or are they parenting different than me and I'm just uncomfortable?
Right.
I just think it's a good check for anybody when we're looking at anything from the outside in.
Right.
To just ask the simple question, is it just different than I would do it?
Yeah.
And is that making me uncomfortable? And if the answer is yes there, then you definitely have something to look at inward that you get to work on. Because most things that make us uncomfortable, or when we're judging someone else, is an inward look at something uncomfortable about ourselves.
Sure.
And that is, to me, the most beautiful opportunity to find growth and where you need to be more resilient in an area of your life.
Yes. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's also an opportunity for people to learn about the journey, not just for themselves, but learn about the context for others and where they've come from. And to your point, if their child's in harm's way and there is evidence of physical abuse, some sort of abuse or neglect, of course, like
let's be clear about that.
Yeah. There's a process.
There's an obligation for you to report that. Yeah.
But I think just being hasty to make assumptions about people that have some sort of background and now they're just, they're continuing the cycle. Well, and congratulations to you, Celeste, that you could sit in that space for a minute, especially taking that feedback from your mom, of whom you were wrapped in this very interesting and delicate circle with, with alcoholism and abuse and being able to sit in a space where you can have a candid.
And this is my adopted mom.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. No, I love that. But just mom, right? Yeah. Because I think we have going back to that relationship with your mom and allowing feedback to come from a safe space, someone who did take you in a different direction. That's right. That's beautiful to be open to that. Yeah. And have somebody else's perspective and you being willing to step into it and make an adjustment
and say,
for your
thank you for sharing as opposed to getting defensive.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that with me. She obviously felt uncomfortable.
Right.
For a reason.
Yeah.
And she felt comfortable with you. And I always say that all the lives in a child's life belong to the child. Meaning as parents, we're constantly thinking through who should and shouldn't be in our children's lives, especially when they're little. Yeah. It's part of our job.
Right.
But sometimes they should still have a relationship with somebody just because you don't always. And I think that's a tough line to sometimes cross. Like if that relationship is important to your child, I think it's worth asking why instead of we just don't have a relationship with them. Yeah. Maybe dig a little deeper and ask, why is that relationship important to you? And let's talk about that. Because what happens is they start to turn against being able to talk to you about it because you've closed a door on them. Yeah. And I think all relationships in the life of a child belong to them, whether you love it or not. Yeah. So at least having the conversation, which is important when a child's removed from their home, and why there's so much more emphasis than there was when I was in child welfare in the 80s, to look at what connection really means for the child. So now, for example, when we have family meetings are a big movement with children who are removed, but family looks different today. The family meeting that wraps around the child now, it could be a pastor, it could be a soccer coach, a teacher, a neighbor.
Someone that's trusted.
Who's meaningful in the child's life as opposed to who do I identify as the biological connections to the family. Yeah. We're so far past that now in terms of who connects with children that those family, quote unquote, family dynamics and family meetings are more important than ever to give a voice to the child. Because when I talked earlier about losing champions, we might identify one of them that can stay in the life and be a champion to that child.
Who was your champion?
That's a good question. I lost everybody in my life. Over and over every time I moved, every 6 months. And my adoption was also closed. So I had no connection with all my family members that helped actually take care of me when I was little. So the loss for me was very, very substantial. And at the time, so when I could just take care of my sister, it didn't hit me yet. Right. And then when I immediately went into being adopted after being told by an abusive home, but I was told I was so lucky because nobody wants older kids anyway. So I just let that process happen.
What a terrible thing to say.
Yeah. Everybody kept saying, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. And I remember thinking, man, your version of lucky is so different than mine. Right. Like I just feel like I'm really not lucky, but I guess I am because maybe you're saying it could be worse. Right. So I accept this abusive, weird placement and was adopted as a Christmas gift to a younger sibling. Did everything she wanted to do. And again, my optimism kicked in because I thought, I've been a good big sister. I can do this. Yeah. Okay. I'll be the best Christmas present you've ever had. Wow. And it just wasn't enough because that wasn't the point of being adopted by a psychotic mother. There was no win. There's really no win with being a good sister or a good Christmas present. So as I learned that and that abuse, and then there was a lot of, so when people ask, what religion did you grow up in? I always say, well, it depends on what family I lived in.
Right.
Which is kind of like
it changed every 6
living
months.
that's right. Living in 30 cities. I have a great appreciation for world travel.
Yeah.
I also have a great appreciation for religions that are nothing like I would experience. I lived with Jewish families, Mormon families, Catholic families, atheist families. I mean, I have lived with as many different types of families as you can imagine. Yeah. And I have a deep appreciation that the belief system is so personal because of that.
That's something that I don't think we think. That's not even in the realm of thinking when I think about the welfare system as kids experiencing so many different associations with family cultures, religion. It's your focus is really on the kid themselves and not necessarily.
So imagine being a child that is Native American and you are adopted into a non-Native American family.
Wow. Yeah.
Imagine the culture that you potentially lose unless you're a family that really embraces that. Or we have children come into the shelter that are African American and their hair is different. The way they comb their hair and the way they need to take care of their hair, uniquely different than someone like me, for sure, that can use almost anything. Right. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's not the same for them. And so I think culture really plays into kiddos in child welfare because we're placing them as quickly as possible into whatever home will take them. And so now think, okay, they lost all their things and all their people and all their attachments. Now their culture, they're almost asked to start and stop and start and stop over again.
Oh yeah, the loss of identity.
The sense of self is just not even there.
Yeah. So for you, Celeste, going through that experience, and I know you referenced God earlier in your relationship with God earlier, and I think you are inherently a positive person. I think you were blessed with that gift for sure of optimism and so being in this space where you've had to be optimistic for others personally, and you've had to be optimistic for yourself. How did your faith, your personal faith, right, outside of religion, but your personal connection with spirituality, what did you draw on? What did that do for you to move you to the next, level of resilience, if you will?
So when I was a kiddo, and I appreciate being able to talk about it because it's unique to be asked that question about God or spirituality in interviews, but and I don't touch on it in this book. I will in my next. Good. Because I had to find my way back, long story short. But as a child, I always had these feelings that I didn't understand, which was every sexual or physical abuse situation I was in, I had a presence on the left side.
Oh, you're going to give me chills right now.
It was always a hand on my left shoulder. Always. So I didn't fully understand like, oh, what is that? But I very much felt same side, same hand. And I was always told, you will not die here today.
You're going to make me cry.
But it's beautiful because I didn't have to fully get it to know that it was there. Yeah. But then unfortunately what happened as I moved through the system and I was adopted by this abusive mother is that the religion I ended up in with that family was played against me in every single situation where I was told by very high-powered men, no less, and I happened to have been abused by men, so that's why that's complicated. Yeah. With very high power, we keep things in the home. We stay in the home, even though I'm like that. I could die here. God, using the word God in those contexts, God wants you to do this. Being brought around an altar and told that this family not only is yours today, but forever. You have to stay in this family. I mean, there reached a point. So I always talk about rock bottom, that we never know people's rock bottom. But when I think of children in child welfare, we don't know, like people will read my story or hear parts of it and they're like, ooh, I bet you that must have been rock bottom. Nope. Yeah. Losing that family was not rock bottom. Right. Okay. This next part must have been rock. Nope. Right. Still wasn't. It really wasn't until I was about 15 and I realized what I thought at the time was, okay, not only do I no longer have a purpose, so no more siblings to take care of, no more children, but I don't even have a God that wants me. So it discounted all the beautiful belief that I had with that feeling that was awesome, that I discounted. Well, I guess I don't know what that was. I thought that was different. I thought that was special and meaningful.
Yeah.
So it was just in my head. That was nothing. So I discount. And I'm told forever, I would have to really be with a family forever that would not want me.
Right.
I didn't process, there's no way that was true. After all my experiences, I really thought not even the God that I thought loved me loves me, meaning I have no purpose. Meaning now I drop out of high school, I start drinking. So up until then, I didn't do anything like that.
Right.
That was not a thing for me.
Yeah.
I found some level of optimism somehow.
And some purpose in something.
And it was a higher spiritual power in my life that I didn't have to get yet, but it still existed inside of me and around me. And I surrounded myself with people often that were also of like mind. Then I stopped because I didn't believe anymore.
Right.
And it took a lot of years. Then I hit rock bottom. Then I became the bully. And I have a really tough chapter in my book of writing about that.
Yes.
I thought the writing about saying goodbye to my father was going to be the hardest chapter. I cried so hard writing that I had to stop.
Yeah.
It was just so hard. And then I decide, okay, if I'm going to publish a book and be the most authentic version of myself, and it's going to be all the hard stuff, then I have to talk about something I'm really not proud of.
Yeah.
And that's hurting other people.
Yeah.
And those that'll read it will totally justify it. But it's not the point.
Right.
The point is, at some point, we still have to acknowledge we have parts of ourselves we don't always love, the little judgments that come in, or the things we say, or the way we behave. And there's always variations and levels of that. But for me, to hurt the only girl that friended me, and then I hurt an adopted father by lying, you can't, I always tell foster kids, every time you think maybe that rock bottom is hit, I'm going to promise you it hasn't unless you finally make the decision to hurt someone else. That will be your rock bottom.
Wow.
Because finding your way back from that, especially with no spiritual belief system, it doesn't even exist.
Yeah. Well, and it's not a question of when or like if, right? It's like this will, because I feel like, Celeste, God aside, like hurt people.
That's right.
And if there's not a process of recovery and healing and resilience, if you don't have that toolbox, the next logical action is that you are taking that energy and putting it somewhere. Right. And so I really appreciate that you just are very candid about that with people and say, this was my experience. So for you, and I do want to mention this chapter about your dad, because I think it's interesting that you've you've struck a chord with men who are in prison, who have been through this experience of being the abuser and having to sit in that space and recognize hurt people.
That's right.
And who did I hurt? And to reconcile with that and to connect with you on that level through that chapter in your book is powerful. And so I know you're going to be doing you're going to touch on that in another book, but I'm excited for you to open that can of worms, if you will, because it
Very
is
important.
so, you have to see it, you have to acknowledge it, and you have to put context to it and recognize where you have ownership. And for you did that, you know? And so what moved you from that chapter to the next, right? What brought you back full circle to this spirituality?
When I started working for our founder and my co-author, Richard Paul Evans,
who's an amazing
at
person.
age 22.
Yeah, that's incredible. Which is
a long
its
time
own
ago.
story, but that's its own story.
It is
how
its
you
own
went
story.
From there to
it's a beautiful story. But here we are
with Richard
He's
Paul
the
Evans.
first person that says to me when he hears about the stories and religion and all the things, he's the first one that says to me, it is not God that left you, and it is not God that wronged you. It was the people in your life. And unfortunately, it happened enough that it made you really believe that. But you as a mom, he asked me, do you really believe that the God that you felt was in your life would abandon you because of anything you did? Would you abandon your children? And I'm like, well, of course not.
Yeah.
Why would God abandon you? You were wronged by people. And it was the first time somebody that I respected that was building me up and helping me feel like, we said earlier, I can be more than just a mom and a wife, which is admirable, but there were other skill sets that I realized I had as a woman and a leader.
Talents and gifts.
And so, he helped me start to realize. So I had a lot of respect for him. And so he was the first person and a man that said, you're so much more capable than where you've been allowed in your past. There's so many doors you get to open in your life. And I finally just kind of had this glimpse of, okay, I mean, it makes sense. It's going to take me a minute to get through it. Therapy, I'll just never stress the importance enough that you have to work on yourself. And just slowly but surely started guiding myself through these kind of principles that I was trying to get my head around. But the problem was, so people ask, why Garbage Bag Girl? Like, why the title? At first it was just, okay, it seemed like a no-brainer because I put myself in a garbage sack every 6 months. Yeah. But through writing the book, I realized that it's more about, for me, the mentality that we get of being garbage. Yeah. Or being no more important than the things we put in the garbage sack. Yeah. And
things you throw away.
Yes. That's right. Things you throw. It's a great way of saying that. So the more I got my head around, okay, that's why I feel this way, the more, and then again, therapy, and I could start to make connections around my belief systems, because the thing the book doesn't talk about is the next 25 years of the toxic, very toxic relationships. Yeah. Husbands, friends, just decisions, the moving my kids every year to year and a half. All of that's not talked about in this book. Maybe the next one, but it's about, if you're really in the mentality of feeling like trash, then you're making trash decisions.
Totally. Yeah.
So
action follows thought, right?
That's right. Yeah. And kind of like hurt people. Right. And I didn't want to keep being a hurt person that would hurt people. And from the outset, people didn't see that part of me. It's like, well, how are you so successful with the life you've had? And that, and I'm like, well, you're not here. Right. You don't know what's going on up in here. You don't live with me. Right. So you don't see the chaos. Yeah. And that's very real, the decisions that we make. And I had just very life-altering, tough decisions, one after the other. And it wasn't until writing my book and learning to go on retreats with people that are more like me and find strong, successful women that I could surround myself with when I hadn't had a world of that, that I finally found a path back to a spirit that eventually, so this is just the last 2 years of finding my path back to even being able to say God and having prayer. And I mean, that's a new path for me in terms of coming back to that belief, that faith system, a higher power for me. Anything with divine intervention. I've finally been able to connect dots that my life has just been completely led up to what I get to do today. It was very much guided in this way. And to be able to say I wouldn't change one thing to change where I am today is a really big statement when you read my book. Yeah. And I would not. If it really altered where I get to be today, what I get to do, the people I get to meet, the true love I have for my higher power and the belief system I have in that, and finding real love and support in my life. I mean, I couldn't have had it without that. And now is when the resiliency really gets to kick in, when I'm like, okay, being optimistic was always one thing, but finding purpose, finding connection and community, those are all other resiliency skills that we get to keep building over and over again. Yeah.
With the added layer of a deep inner connection to your soul and to your divine power. How beautiful is that?
Which connects you. I think people in faith oftentimes don't get to see that connection of it coming back to you. That connection of finding, like you said, your soul, your faith, your higher power brings you back to your connection. Yeah. And then you really learn who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the beautiful thing
awesome.
about that, Celeste, well, and I'm just loving your share. Thank you so much, because I think there's truth is truth. And when you feel truth, you can't say you don't. It lights you up from the inside out.
I always say that you cannot turn around anymore and unsee it.
Yeah, you can't. You can't unfeel it. You can't unthink it. You can't. It just becomes, if you allow it, it just becomes part of who you are. And so I'm feeling the truth of your statement in that this has been your experience. And I also feel the truth in the statement that there has been a protector in your life, that even when you were separated from yourself, there was a divine hand there to say, you're going to come back. I believe in you, that you're going to make it. You're going to make the choice to come back. And I think that's a beautiful testament also to letting people, and easy for me to say, Celeste, not sitting in your shoes or millions of other people's shoes, but allowing for people's choices to be theirs when they have such a huge impact on you.
That's right.
But to be able to separate who you are,
that's right, your
divinity and your optimism and your mission from the things that are happening to you.
That's right. I am not their judge.
Yeah. Well,
and it actually takes a tremendous amount of pressure off of yourself when you get to say, because I think there's that confusion with forgiveness. Mm-hmm. You're not forgiving for somebody else. You're forgiving so you don't have an attachment to that. That's right. Yeah. So when we start to understand that, then we get to go the next level of, I think, what you're talking about. And that is, it's kind of like the bully chapter. I don't condone bad behavior in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. But I also don't have to attach to it, and I don't have to stay attached to it. And I get to release myself from saying, I wish you well. When I've ended relationships with my first adopted mom, my biological mom, it was a very healthy, this relationship doesn't serve me in a healthy way. And I truly wish you nothing but the best. But I'm not your judge. You don't need my approval at all to move forward with your life. And I don't need yours. Right. And it's very freeing to get to be able to say that and recognize that and leave relationships. Because I always say when you, the stronger your relationship with your higher power and your source and you, the higher your frequency. And the people that don't belong in your life, you won't even have to start making the decisions of letting them go. They won't fit in your life. Right. Yeah, there won't be room. That's right. They will drop off. They may be weird. Right. But you don't have to own that. That's right. They won't fit into that higher level of frequency you start to obtain for yourself. Right. Yeah. And sometimes I feel like too that that's okay. We try too hard to keep them. Like we try too hard. When we are growing, we try too hard to continue the relationships that really, they don't fit. And so sometimes we want to bring them up with us. Right. And I get that, especially family, like that can be really complicated. But the difference is the people that attach to you in this space, in a healthy space, are people that you don't have to bring with you. That's right. They come with you, right? They grow with you. Yep. So, thank you so much for this, Celeste. I want to know how you've taken these lessons in resiliency. And they are, every single thing that you've described is a lesson in overcoming and being stronger on the other side. And also acknowledging that you went through some really awful times in your life personally, outside of the abuse that happened to you. You yourself made decisions that you regret. Yep. And I think I've said it before, but I think some of the hardest decisions, some of the hardest experiences to be resilient from are the ones that we created for ourselves. The most hard, I believe. Yeah. That's so, right. So for you've had all this experience. How do you transfer that to the Christmas box house, to the kids that you're helping? What do you do for them to help them understand that they have a certain amount of resiliency that they are in charge of? I think, so first of all, in anything you do, I think forgiveness of yourself is important to start with, which is very hard. Yes, the hardest. It's very hard. Like we just said, right? Like that's very the hardest. So while that journey keeps happening and, you feel better, you feel more enlightened, you feel more empowered with that, I get to have these really cool conversations, like 10 or 11, maybe even 12. There was a boy at the shelter and he was playing around one day, I think just with a basketball. And I'm watching him watch his sister very closely. And I just start having like a general conversation, like, how's your day and all the things. And he's super, super sad. And he says something about, I don't matter anyway. Very casually.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a direct, like, did you hear it? Or it was very casual, just almost like every day.
Like this was just accepted.
This is just a Tuesday. Yeah.
Right. And
I said, buddy, did you just say that you don't matter? And he said, well, yeah, but it was really not a big deal for him. He's like, yeah, but I don't, but my sister does. And I immediately was like taken back to my sister and exactly how I would have felt.
Yeah.
My day today doesn't matter as long as she's okay. And I thought, he's very purposefully driven. So, I mean, it was
so
just...
you just recognized it.
Oh my gosh. It was like, I might as well have just sat in his little soul and been him.
Oh.
And I'm trying really hard not to get super emotional like right now. And I said, hey, I bet you love your sister so much. And he says, oh, the most. And I said, so can you tell me what you love about her? And he's just naming all the things. She's got a pretty smile. And look when she does that. And she's so smart. And he's just naming all these awesome things. And I said, so you see all that in her and you love all those things about her and you love her. So why don't you deserve the same thing that she gets? Do you get to have that? Do you deserve that? I don't know, maybe. So we kept having conversation about it. And all I could think to myself was, and we're talking about the things he gets to do there and the things he likes, is planting seeds of just asking him. So instead of saying, oh, don't talk about yourself that way or stop talking, I really was hoping that he would understand, like I would have wanted someone to say to me, ask me, do I deserve the way I feel about her? And he did. Yeah. And unfortunately, I won't get to maybe see him until now. Being 29 years strong as an organization, we get alumni that come back, which is beautiful. The best. Yeah. And they do get to share the stories of the impact that was made. And I do get to hear all the things that matter to them that we've affected. Wow. And I know. And I know very much that, because I always remind people that they're not, when the kids come into the shelter, they're not asking for the day-to-day things that kids are used to having from us. So like I give the example of, I call her Kimberly. When she first came to the shelter, we had just opened our doors in Salt Lake, 8 years old. And I was like, Kimberly, what do you want for Christmas this year? What can we get for you? And she says, I'll just have a shirt with a tag on it. She never had anything new. Wow. She just wanted a shirt with a tag on it. Or the 17-year-old boy that told us, I get to see my parents this weekend because smartphones aren't allowed in the shelter for security purposes. I get to see my parents this weekend, and I'm pretty sure it's the very last time I'll see them. So if I could have a camera to take their picture, that's all I would like for Christmas. He's 17. Wow. So when kids are asking for like a car or they're getting their driver's license, or you think just about like perspective, what normally looks like, I was like, the beauty in what I get to help facilitate is I get to call my team and say, no matter what he gets for Christmas, to make sure there's a camera for him. And it's significant to get to make a difference like that I know would have made all the difference in my life. If I could have captured, so that picture on that cover is only one of 2 childhood pictures I have. Wow. And it's way before cell phones. But I mean, if we can help give them memories of what child looks like. So when alumni come back, there's a couple things they always do when they come back into the shelters. And one is they talk about the first experience of the tree that's decorated every seasonal for them, and the stuffed animals they get to choose from. Wow. Picking out the first stuffed animal, 100% they always talk about. Oh. And the other is something they kept. Yeah. Like when little kids, and it's moms, when we save all their stuff, I'm like, this is what you came home in the hospital with. Yeah. And they act like they don't care, but we know they really love it. Right. Same thing. They're like, this was the first pair of jeans I got.
Yeah.
Or Ricky the raccoon.
Wow.
An adult told us he got that stuffed animal as a little boy. He still had, because they didn't have the new and the childhood memories, and they hold on to those from one of our shelters as a first positive memory or a first and only new thing they'd ever had. And those small, meaningful impacts that we do, like even as a community, by far, those small acts of kindness are what grow and continue and carry with them to find the hope, which is, of course, another resiliency skill, the ability to have that hope. If we can instill hope in people.
Tangible. Yeah.
And it's buildable.
Right.
We build on hope. Hope can still have a plan.
Yeah.
It's not this fantasy, no plan game. Hope can have a plan.
Yeah.
But hope will build you to the next level of whatever you're going to do.
Isn't that the most, I think that's the most incredible thing about hope. Is that, you know, I think when we always hope. We hope for better. We hope every day I'm sure there's a million psychologists that could give me the answer for this, but you know, I really always think about the connection between the human spirit and hope, and that they are so intertwined. You can't separate the human spirit from hope. It's this thing that just innately lives in us. Which is why when you don't have it, it breaks. Yeah. That's right. Yes. You know, and so I really appreciate that is the mission, is to continue the journey of hope for these kids. And when I say these kids, I mean specifically the kids that are at, you know, the Christmas Box House, but also kids everywhere. You know, I know when kids come to the CJC, they also get a stuffed animal. And I really appreciate that you put more and deeper context to the reason that that's so significant. Very. Scientifically, there's a reason there as well, a comfort item, right? Yep. Yeah. But to hold on to it as a hope builder, that's so beautiful. I love that. Celeste, we could just sit and talk for hours. I just love this. You're such a good friend to just sit and have tea with. No, I just love it. Well, because I think these are conversations that we don't have. I mean, how often do we get to sit down with somebody who's been through this experience and say, oh my goodness, tell me all about the intricacies of your journey, right? Yeah. And I really appreciate the time that you took to be here with me today, because I know that there's kids. I know that there's adults right now who have been through this, who every single word that you've just spoken, they absolutely resonate with and they feel. And I would love for you to share any message that's on your heart for people that have been through what you've been through and are journeying on, you know, with it still. Yeah. Oh gosh. So I have these bracelets and I brought you one. Yes, says, I have one. Yes, I love it. That says you matter. Yeah. And we talk about that more now a lot. And I always think it's really important to always tell someone else they matter. But I think more importantly, you don't get really good at telling other people they matter until you remind yourself that you do. Yeah. That you are loved. And the self-love isn't love isn't condoning bad behavior or saying I didn't make a mistake today that I can't correct. Love is just the pure, genuine, every day I deserve that reset and that restart to feel loved and to feel worthy and to feel like I matter. And if you're a kiddo or a teenager in child welfare right now, or you are even an adult who transitioned out, don't forget who you are and how truly amazing you are. And if you don't know yet, that's the journey I challenge you to find, is really who you are. You've usually lived in a system where you're told all the time who you are, who you get to be, what that journey should look like for you. And now the greatest power that can't be taken from you is the choice to get to choose that for you. At some point, you do get to make that choice. And that's why the healthy decisions and the healthy people that you're around and all those choices you make really matter very early on. Yes. Because the more you can try to, do those on a healthier level, the less you have to unravel later. So
keep pushing forward on those. But I think you just cannot undervalue, like, no one expected me. As a matter of fact, I was so excused to be nothing. When my second adopted mom, who my book is dedicated to, said, you can stay here, but in a much more colorful way. You have to get your butt back into school.
Yeah.
I was literally surprised and said, I mean, okay, if it's a deal breaker, like nobody just ever said.
Right.
Matter of fact, they said, you don't have to turn in that assignment. You don't have to finish your homework, because no one expects you to really be successful anyway, Celeste.
Wow.
And there's no value in staying in that place.
Yeah. And you get to choose to not stay there.
You absolutely get to choose
it's
of
your
pulling
choice.
out of being that victim of who is always people always berating and telling you what you can and can't do. You do get to choose that.
Right.
It is a choice. As a matter of fact, it's one of the only things you consistently get to. You don't get to choose. I always say the only thing, because we're so from DNA so uniquely different, the only thing you and I have 100% in common is change will happen. No matter what.
Yeah.
We both get to say, yep, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know what it looks like, feels like, even tastes like, but it's going to happen.
Right.
And the only thing I can do is choose my reaction to it.
Yeah.
Keep choosing my path towards it, and keep choosing and believing that I'm worth so much more than what is with me today.
Yeah. And if you matter, you'll make the good choices for yourself that make you feel like you matter.
You can only start with you.
Yeah. I love that.
You can't start with someone else and then come back to you.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Celeste, thank you for this. And I want to encourage anyone who is struggling in a space to understand if they do matter, to please come back and listen to this interview frequently and read Celeste's book and get connected with the Christmas Box House. Have a purpose, have a mission, put yourself in a position to be elevated by these good works and these good words and these good people, and give back to other kids who desperately need what you can offer them. So Celeste, thank you so much. Where do we find your book?
Amazon.
Okay.
My mom always says, if it's not on there, you don't need it anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like your mom. I feel that way too, a little bit. So thank you so much. We'll make sure that we put the links in the show notes, and also please visit thechristmasboxhouse.org.
Thechristmasbox.org.
Thechristmasbox.org. Thank you. So we'll put that link down here too. And I want to just simply say thank you to Richard Paul Evans, who instilled this beautiful belief in this beautiful woman who we now get to benefit from. And so thank you to the advocates out there who see things in kids that they don't see in themselves and encourage good works to happen. So thank you to you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Celeste.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Refined Resilience. We hope you found inspiration in the stories shared and the small moments that remind us all of our strength. Remember, resilience is built not just in the big challenges we face, but in the everyday experiences that shape who we are. A special thanks to our sponsor, Build Then Bless, for making Refined Resilience possible. Until next time, remember, it's the small moments of resilience that make us great.